Peymon who?
Mottahedeh.
Peymon Mottahedeh. Who is he?
Never paid taxes in 30 years. Fought the U.S. tax court and won.
See, I believe our rights come from God, not from government. Welcome, my friends, to Freedom Law School's Freedom Hour. This is Peymon Mottahedeh, the president of Freedom Law School at freedomlawschool.org. In this presentation tonight, I have a very special guest for you. This man is not just an old friend of mine. He is a celebrated whistleblower. The first man ever with the IRS to come out and expose IRS fraud and deception of the American people for trillions of dollars for decades. And he has an incredible story to share with you about his career as a special agent with the IRS's Criminal Investigation Division. Yes, those guys that put people in prison for taxes, carry a gun. He was one of them. So in this presentation, you're going to get the first part of a three-part series on his incredible journey from a gun-carrying IRS special agent to a whistleblower hero confronting the IRS commissioner himself at the top about the corruption, systematic corruption of the entire income tax system, to him leaving, to the IRS try to silence him, put him in prison even, and failing. He still stood on top of his incredible story you'll hear. So be sure to watch part 2 and 3, which we'll be doing in the upcoming weeks after this program. So with that, help me welcome Mr. Geoff Banister. Joe, welcome to being with me at the program, my friend. It's great to see you.
Thanks, Peymon. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be on your show, to see you in person, as we've done many times over the years.
By the way, Joe Banister's website is agentfortruth.com. Agentfortruth.com, because that's the kind of man Joe Banister has been. So if you want to know the truth, he's the agent that will get you to it. So without any further delay, let's start, Joe, if you could tell our audience about your background, how your family situation, and, give us a rundown of how you, after, high school, what did you do, maybe about your family a little bit, and get to eventually become, looking to get a job at the IRS.
Thank you. Well, Joseph Banister is my real name. I was born and raised in San Jose, California, middle class, Roman Catholic family, baptized, born and raised a Catholic, still a Catholic today, almost my 63rd birthday. And anyway, grew up, went to Catholic schools, Catholic elementary school, Catholic high school, and then on to junior college in San Jose City College, and then from there to San Jose State University. I have 3 younger brothers. My mom and dad were married until death did they part. My father passed away just a few months before I was sworn in the to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division back in 1993. So, pretty typical middle-class upbringing. Went to San Jose State. Took me about 5 years, a 5-year plan to get through college. And when I graduated from college, I went ahead and pursued a CPA certificate. By the way, I was an accounting major at San Jose State. And so typically it's not unusual for someone with an accounting degree to try to pursue becoming a certified public accountant, so a CPA. So I did that. I graduated in 1986 from San Jose State. And from about, 86 through 91, I worked in the accounting field. Started out at a very small firm founded by two partners who used to be managers at a firm called Peat Marwick, which for many years now has been known as KPMG. And so worked there for about 3 years. It's an international accounting firm. And received my CPA certificate, I think around 1991 timeframe. So during these 4 or 5 years after graduating, it took me that long to realize that, maybe accounting wasn't going to be a very exciting career, and I needed to spice up my career a bit more. So I decided to pursue a career in law enforcement, and went ahead and, did that. I investigated which agencies were basically looking for people with an accounting, finance, tax background. And I settled on the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, and also the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. And another reason, besides the accounting field being a bit boring, was that I had lots of relatives and friends who were either in government service or law enforcement government service. In fact, the next brother, Banister brother down from me, became a California Highway Patrol officer. And, at this point, he's actually retired. He retired as a lieutenant in the CHP, California Highway Patrol. The next brother down worked in the Daly City Fire Department as a firefighter originally, and he's risen to battalion chief in the Daly City Fire Department. Still there, actually hasn't retired yet. And then the baby brother, the fourth one down, Geoff, he just retired from the San Jose Police Department after a 25, 30-year career as a police officer with the city of San Jose. So I got to take a break from talking, but I mean that basically brings us up through college and choosing to an avenue of law enforcement, and particularly federal law enforcement.
So having that background in accounting that you had in formal education and also working in the field, what got you to look outside of that into becoming a special agent with the IRS's Criminal Investigation Division?
Well, the two brothers that I mentioned that were police officers for a career, that was uniformed police, right? The San Jose Police Department or the California Highway Patrol, and had a lot of other friends, a cousin who was in the Sacramento Police Department, friends that I grew up with that were in the San Jose Police Department. So basically, I knew that there was a uniformed law enforcement route, but I figured that with my background in accounting, that more of a criminal investigator role would be more appropriate. And in fact, there was also a friend of the family who had spent a career as an IRS special agent. And just for your listeners and viewers, as far as differentiating, the reason that they call a special agent special is because they have special duties that aren't shared by other agents, say, within the IRS. So the special means that you have powers of arrest, powers to execute search warrants, powers to carry a firearm, things like that. So where in the IRS you might have someone called a revenue agent or a revenue officer, my title in the IRS was special agent. And in fact, all the federal agencies, or a great majority of them, have a special agent position. So when you see an FBI agent interviewed, a current one or a retired one, they're almost invariably going to be an FBI special agent. The ICE agents that you see out there doing investigations, Immigration Customs Enforcement, they are special agents. So pretty much Secret Service, the agents that protect the president and others, they are special agents. So there's a grade 1811 series, which makes you designated as the special agent with these powers of arrest, powers to execute search warrants, powers to criminally investigate people. So being that there was this family friend who actually spent his career as an IRS special agent, and then that person who ended up becoming my boss years later, Bob Guarini, he also worked closely with other special agents in other bureaus like the FBI or the DEA. So through Bob, who was an IRS special agent, I was introduced to some of these other agencies, such as FBI, DEA, Secret Service. The precursor to ICE was known as the INS, for Immigration and Naturalization Service. They had special agents also. The Customs Service did. So anyway, there's lots of choices, but I found that my first choice was the FBI. And again, this is back in the 1990s when, Waco and Ruby Ridge and things like that were happening. But for many decades prior to that, the FBI had a pretty stellar reputation. And, so FBI is my first choice, but I also applied to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, primarily because this gentleman, Bob Guarini, kind of sold me on, well, hey, you know a lot about income tax. You're a CPA. I think the IRS would be a good fit. And I'm thinking, well, gosh, I don't know if I want to work for the IRS, But it turned out that the FBI had a hiring freeze. And even though I was fully qualified to be sent to Quantico to begin training and was basically waiting for that opportunity, the IRS had a hiring authority. They were not affected by the hiring freeze. And the IRS offered me a position in August of 1993. So I went ahead and said yes, accepted that position, and by November of 1993, I was sworn in the San Francisco office of the IRS Criminal Investigation Division to be a special agent.
Well, and during that special agent career that you had, could you tell us a little bit about the training you got, and how long you were for, any special things you ever come across, people who don't file income tax? Tell us a bit more about that, your tenure as a special agent, Joe.
Well, of course, prior to going into the IRS, as I said, I did earn a CPA certificate, and I worked in public accounting, as they call it, the KPMG international firm, and also a couple smaller accounting firms. I was a controller in a venture capital firm in Menlo Park, California. So I had quite a bit of experience on the outside, so to speak, outside of government. And typically, most IRS agents, at least back then, probably still today, would graduate from college or high school, and they would go directly into the IRS and then come out into the private sector, if at all. Whereas me, I was in the private sector to begin with and then went into the IRS. So a little bit of a culture shock that I wasn't prepared for when I went in to work for the IRS. Anyway, typically, I imagine my experiences are pretty typical. Your first day on the job as an IRS special agent, of course, you're eventually going to carry a gun, have a badge, do criminal investigations. But your first day on the job, when you've had no criminal investigator training, you don't have a firearm because you haven't been trained with one yet. And so you basically just do, they kind of keep you under close watch so you don't do anything stupid. And you have what's called a coach, a person, a seasoned, experienced special agent who will kind of show you the ropes, perhaps take you out on some investigative trips, to interview a witness and try to give you some experience. But I remember in my case, I was there a day or two, and I think I even wanted to just leave the office while, during a work day. And they said, no, you can't leave the office or talk with anyone because you have to go get sworn in. In other words, I had to go get sworn in to support and defend the Constitution. I had to take my constitutional oath before I could really do anything relating to my job. So I thought that was, quite interesting. So I was hired in the San Francisco office, and for those that know or don't know the San Francisco Bay Area, you have to go across the Bay Bridge to Oakland, where there's another federal building, and that's where I was sworn oath to support and defend the Constitution. And then about a month or so after I was hired, then I was sent to Glencoe, Georgia, to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center for an 8-week criminal investigator training. And that is a kind of a basic training that special agents from all the different agencies go to. Typically, the FBI and the DEA train at the Quantico training facility in Quantico, Virginia, whereas most of the other agencies, EPA and Secret Service and Border Patrol and ICE, and they all train at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Glencoe, Georgia. So that's where I was sent in late 1993, early 1994 for an 8-week training session. And there was also, interestingly enough, I was chosen or voted to be president of that training class. And it was kind of funny the way that happened, because I was sitting in this arena, kind of a amphitheater classroom, and I'm down at the bottom because my name is Banister, so I'm at the beginning of the alphabet. And they asked for someone to volunteer to collect picture money, money for the class picture. And I look around when they ask for a volunteer, and no one's raising their hand. And I'm thinking, well, how hard could it be to collect picture money? I mean, I'll volunteer. So I raised my hand and volunteered. And then the next question was, okay, well, now we have to elect a class president. And so out of 40-something people, the only person that raised their hand and got noticed by everybody was me, because I volunteered to collect the picture money. So they ended up electing me class president. And so I was class president for the 8-week session. And then when I came back for a second 8-week session, we all had to come back for more specialized criminal investigator training. And at that point, I was reelected class president for another 8-week session. So took lots of video and pictures. I was also kind of the class historian. I was able to bypass any of the tax classes because I was already a certified public accountant, and with the tax training I already had, I basically wasn't required to take the IRS training because, as far as they could tell, I already knew the material. So there was about 16 weeks of that total training near the beginning of my career in 1993, 1994. And then it was, I think, like March of 1994, I was fully trained, with the firearm, with all the criminal investigator training. And I was sent back to the San Francisco office to begin, a full, expected a 20-year career with the IRS. Eventually, I was actually transferred from San Francisco back down to San Jose, which is where I was born and raised, where I grew up. And so, mid-1994, I thought it was pretty cool that, I'd become a federal agent, federal criminal investigator in my hometown. And the IRS didn't typically move agents around like the FBI, the Secret Service would. So I had this pretty cool, law enforcement job right there in my hometown. So when we would do surveillances and investigations, I pretty much knew all my surroundings, all the way from San Jose up to San Francisco and everywhere in between.
And you had a very interesting experience, Joe, on your first day at the job, which relates to the you opening up the Internal Revenue Code, the law, the Bible of the IRS, which is a very interesting aspect of your experience early on. Maybe perhaps you can share that with the audience.
Sure. So first day on the job, as I said, I came from the outside. I wasn't a government worker prior to then. And so, I had the attitude and the ethics that, well, if I'm getting paid to do work, I should be actually working. But as I mentioned, without any training and had barely taken the oath to support and defend the Constitution over in Oakland, I couldn't really do much, but I didn't want to do nothing, twiddle my thumbs because I was getting paid. So I looked up on the shelf of my cubicle and I saw that there was a volume of the Internal Revenue Code. And I forget if there were 2 or 3, big thick books at the time. Yeah, you're holding it up. I think there was actually 2 or 3 volumes of the same code. You've got it all in one bound volume, but yeah, that gives the viewers the idea. And so I thought, okay, well, I know that there's certain sections of the Internal Revenue Code that deal with criminal violations of the income tax laws. So how about if I crack open the Internal Revenue Code and begin to review those sections that I would be investigating and enforcing? So I cracked open the books and I was, looking through and, basically like I was sitting at a library. And again, I had nothing else I could do because I wasn't allowed really to do anything else. And so my boss at the time, who was a former Marine, big, lot thicker mustache than I have, real gruff guy, and he comes over and he says, "Banister, what are you doing?" And I just looked up at him sheepishly and said, "Well, I'm just looking at the Internal Revenue Code, some of the statutes that I'm going to be enforcing and investigating." And he said, "Close that book. You're not a CPA anymore. You're an IRS Special Agent." And I just thought, as I mentioned about culture shock, I just thought it was really odd. Yeah, I didn't really think there's anything like conspiratorial about it, but it just kind of shows the myopic, just closed-mindedness of somehow, I was doing something wrong by looking at inside the Internal Revenue Code.
I mean, your job will be to enforce the criminal federal tax laws here in the Internal Revenue Code book, and his boss is saying, don't worry about the law. Don't even try to understand any aspect of this volume of books of laws that you are going to be paid working full-time to enforce. Don't even crack it open, close it up. We'll just tell you what you do, whether it's lawful or not. Well, you have to just trust us, basically. That's kind of an attitude they have, which is kind of interesting, because people don't realize that these guys, Joe, at the IRS, are ignorant of the law. They're not taught the law. They're just taught to do this, do that, the other, whatever your boss tells you. The law, let us at the very higher levels worry about that. So that's kind of interesting, Joe. Now tell us how you got into the whole tax truth movement. How was that you heard about the income tax system being a complete utter fraud on the American people, and that got you to look into this direction that you eventually ended up leaving the IRS?
Well, as I kind of mentioned, back when I was first sworn in, when I started the work at the IRS, was November of 1993. And so for about 3 years, till around December of 1996, I had, really the time of my life in terms of professional satisfaction. I had earned a certified public accountant certificate, so I was a CPA, and I was a, gun-carrying, badge-wearing IRS criminal investigator working in my hometown, making pretty good money, although I had to take a huge pay cut from the private sector when I went into the government. But, eventually after those 3 years, I was able to work my way up the pay scale. And so I thought those first 3 years would be the first 3 years of a 20-year career with the IRS. And, a law enforcement career in the federal government can be as little as 20 years, and then you're out. So I started when I was about 30, and I would have been able to retire, about 12, 13 years ago when I was 50, with a really nice retirement and lifetime benefits. And that was the expectation after the first 3 years there. But in about December of 1996, about 3 years into my career, I was listening to a talk radio show in the San Francisco Bay Area, as I typically did if I was out in my government car doing investigations, listening to AM radio talk show. The call letters are KSFO, and the radio station is still around, 560 on the dial. And so there was a host on KSFO. His name was Geoff Metcalf. I spelled his first name a little bit different, Geoff, Geoff Metcalf. And Geoff Metcalf had a guest on his show named DV Kidd, and her name's also unusual, Devvy, last name Kidd, Kidd. And so DV Kidd is on Geoff Metcalf's show, and she's talking about, among other things, the federal income tax, and claiming that the federal income tax is voluntary. In other words, there was no mandate in the law, no requirement in the law to file tax returns and pay, I should say file income tax returns and pay federal income tax. And so I literally, when I heard her say this on the show, I was in my government car with my, Sig Sauer 9mm handgun on my hip and my handcuffs, and I was out doing investigations, and I heard her make these claims, and I thought, wow, I always thought this Geoff Metcalf guy was pretty honorable, and his guests had all kinds of truthful information, and I was very impressed by how honest he was and how his guests always had details and information that were provable. They had evidence to back it up. But when he had DV Kidd claiming that the income tax was voluntary, there was no mandate to pay it or to file federal income tax returns, I thought, wow, how could I have misjudged this talk show host to be allowing this woman to make these outrageous claims and make them on a radio station where, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people are going to hear these outrageous claims. So that was in December of 1996, about 3 years into my career with the IRS. And so I decided I have got to get to the bottom of this, okay? Either I am not the great good investigator that I thought I was, where I can tell if I think that somebody is truthful and honorable, like a Geoff Metcalf, and yet the guy's a total clown, he's having clownish people on his show making these outrageous claims, well, that's not good for me because I'm not a very good judge of people's body language and their character. But by the same token, if there's something to this, and yet my job is to, actually investigate people, arrest them, give the investigative information to a prosecutor, to put them in prison, to convict them and put them in prison, then I probably should get to the bottom of this for that reason also. And so that's was my motivation initially to get in touch with DV Kidd, and we are talking about the late 90s, basically early 90s, early to mid 90s. And so I sent away, she said on the radio show that if you sent $2, $1 or $2 in an envelope to an address in Colorado, that she would send her information, her brochures, her booklets. And so I sent away my $2 in December of 1996, and in early to mid-January of 1997, I received these 2 booklets in the mail. One was called Why a Bankrupt America, and then the other was called Blind Loyalty. And in these booklets, DV basically outlined all kinds of stuff that today in 2026 are kind of very familiar to the public because we have had the benefit of the internet since the early 90s. But you have to remember that back in the early to mid 90s, the internet was barely up and running or available to most people. And so I'm, basically still reading her booklets and getting them in the snail mail.
Mm-hmm.
But in there, she gave more details about many issues, but concentrating on the income tax, that was where my focus was. And she mentioned various people who had more information about the income tax. She would provide excerpts from their court cases or their claims that they made, and then provide addresses and phone numbers for some of these people. And so one person in particular, his name was Bill Conklin, and I think by this point Bill's passed away. But anyway, I called up Bill because the phone number was in his press release, and I told him, I'm not, I'm an IRS special agent, but I'm not calling you to do a sting on you or, lie to you. I'm truly just trying to find out what's going on here with the income tax. And your name was in DV Kids booklet, and so I'm trying to find out more information. And so he suggested that I contact a guy named Peymon. And we're talking about, January, February of 1997, and I did not like Peymon. Okay, is this going to be like the king of the tax protesters? What am I getting myself into? Mm-hmm. But, I started the ball rolling calling Bill Conklin, so he said to call Peymon, so I called Peymon. Mm-hmm. So Peymon was the second person, after Bill, mm-hmm. that I got in touch with. And Peymon began to, I guess first off, and, maybe Peymon can describe how he was taking it on his end, but from my end, I was just trying to be sincere. That was interesting.
Let me tell you about that, Joe, because when you first called me, I was called by Bill and said, look, this guy's a special agent of the IRS, but I think he's sincere. He's not looking to investigate us criminally. He really wants to know the truth. And I told him, great, if he is, we'll educate him, tell him the truth, no problem. And then when you called, I could tell you were sincere, and you said you want to know the truth about our claims. So yes, that's when I started educating you and putting you in touch with other people, the movement. I gave you our first course called A Practical Road to Freedom from Oppressive Taxation Control. I used to teach that class. 9-week class, once a week for 9 weeks for 3 hours. I recorded that audio tape. I gave you one of those. I labeled it for you Midnight Basketball. So in case one of your colleagues or your boss sees that in your car, what is this stuff you got here, this Practical Road to Freedom course? Is this some kind of a tax protest material? Why are you looking at this, So in order to protect you from that potential confrontation with your bosses, I just put that label on there and let you study. And you met Sean and Steve of Free Enterprise Society and others from the freedom movement. And but you took a little while to do your investigation, Joe. I remember you were pretty thorough. You took over a while to read at nighttime to investigate things. Is that what you did at nighttime or weekends? You would research on your own everything that you came across?
Yeah, the IRS special agents, I presume it's still the case. We would work 50-hour work weeks, so you'd basically get paid an extra quarter of your salary as overtime. And so rather than a 40-hour week, you'd work 40 plus 10 hours or 50-hour work weeks. So I had a 50-hour work week. The time I was, by the time I was communicating with you, I was in San Jose. I had made that transfer from San Francisco down to San Jose. But with the commute back and forth and a 10-hour work day, and then soccer coach to my young sons and husband and paying all the bills, finding the time was difficult, but I knew I wanted to get to the bottom of it too. So yeah, it took me a couple of years, all throughout 1997, all throughout 1998. And of course, you and I kept in communication, and you put me in touch with other people, other attorneys, CPAs, all kinds of people that I could talk with, and about other topics besides the income tax. But for our purposes, we can concentrate on that. There's enough interesting information there. But yeah, it took me a couple of years to kind of get through it and really make sure as best I could. And there came to a point, after that 2 years when I realized, I think I've gathered about all the information that I can gather to prove that there's something rotten here and that I need to confront my supervisors at the IRS. I guess when I say confront, I more mean approach them. I didn't, want to punch anybody in the nose or get mad at anyone, but I definitely, if I had any bias at all as I started and during that 2-year period, is that this couldn't possibly be true, right? Because my entire professional life revolved around the income tax. Accounting degree where you take tax classes at the university, and then the CPA exam. One of the parts to the CPA exam is on taxation, largely income taxation. Then I go in and become an IRS Special Agent, and there's more training there. And so, I was not believing it could possibly be true. But as a criminal investigator, what's your job is to gather evidence, and not just any evidence, but evidence that could actually be put into court because it's factual, because it's provable, because it's corroborated by other evidence. And so during that 2-year period, I just kept gathering more and more evidence in the form of, statutes, regulations, court cases, history of the income tax and the laws that were passed. And, what I found interesting, of course, is as a financial investigator, the thing that we sniff out is the paper trail, right? It's the paper trail that's always going to get the bad guy. And so the thing is, though, the IRS and the income tax has quite the paper trail also. And so I simply followed that same paper trail, and surprisingly, I guess you could say, came to a conclusion that there's really something deceitful, and illegal, apparently illegal, about this income tax system. And so I need to approach my bosses at the IRS and let them know that, I've been looking into this and I've come to some very concerning, preliminary conclusions. And so that's what I did. I was still working at the IRS during that 2-year period of investigating the income tax. I still go to work every day to earn my pay, do criminal investigations. One particular anecdotal story, which I think is interesting to share, is that I was asked to participate in a search warrant down in the Fresno area. And it was this big, huge, horse property. So they had to have 20 or 30 IRS special agents to conduct this search warrant. And at the time, I was the asset forfeiture coordinator. So in addition to whatever, more law enforcement, gun out kind of that I did initially, my main job was to inventory anything that was seized during the search warrant. And so I was also one of the searchers, one of the people that actually gather evidence in this huge property. And so the guy we were investigating actually had this very big walk-in closet, and inside the closet were bookshelves. And a number of the books on the bookshelves I had in my own bookshelves that I had accumulated over this 2-year period. And so that was a real kind of a red pill moment when I thought, okay, here we are investigating this guy who hadn't filed or paid, and some kind of income tax charges that we may bring against him at some point. And yet he's got these same books that I've either acquired or been given, on loan to investigate, the truth about the income tax. And so that was, just a surreal moment to be standing in this walk-in closet, looking at books that this gentleman had, that I had also in my own bookshelf. Mm. And anyway, it was bizarre.
So you ended up writing a book, though, about the income tax research that you did. Tell us about the book. I know we ended up publishing it for you and distributing the book for you. But tell us what led you to want to write a book, and then how did you, give it to the IRS to refute?
Well, during the 2-year period, it's probably, you don't even have to be a criminal investigator to understand if you're, some store is overcharging you, or the mechanic shop is giving you some repairs that you didn't need, and you have to gather evidence to prove out your case. That's what I did during this 2-year period, is I would gather all these details, all this information that I never learned on the CPA exam, never learned at San Jose State, never learned in IRS training, but nevertheless was truthful because it came out of, the U.S. Supreme Court or the Internal Revenue Code or the Code of Federal Regulations. And so in gathering all of this information, I decided that it might be, beneficial, worthwhile to gather up the highlights, some of the information. If I had gathered up all the information, the report probably would have been hundreds and hundreds of pages long. But I basically gathered up some of the highlights of the evidence that I had encountered, and I put it into a report that was around 95 pages long. And so that report is what I provided. There you go. There's an old copy of it. That report is what I actually submitted to my IRS supervisors at the San Jose, California IRS headquarters. And of course, I spoke with Peymon ahead of issuing the report because I kind of saw the writing on the wall that once I let my bosses know that I'm really concerned about these things, I'm not sure, how much longer I'll be able to last at the IRS. I really wasn't sure whether they'd tried to destroy what was otherwise a very excellent reputation, for being a hard worker, for being diligent, for being, honorable, having integrity. And so I really didn't know what would happen, but Peymon was certainly instrumental in helping me, how do I make sure that the public will know about me or will get to see, some of the evidence that I've encountered. And so basically, as Peymon mentioned earlier, he basically helped me to have, 10,000 copies of that report that I had issued to my supervisors ready in the event that I wouldn't be lasting very much longer at the IRS. So it was about, what's interesting is it's February 10th, and it was February 8th of 1999 when I remember, I think that was around the date that I handed in the report. And I think it was around the February 10th or so.
February 8th, you wrote a letter to the IRS Commissioner.
Yeah.
That's the letter, yep. Have it right here, folks. Keep going, Joe, huh?
So February is always a month that brings back lots of memories. So as I recall, February 8th, so that was when I gave them the details and basically said, hey, in that letter that you're showing the audience, hey, I've kind of gone to bat for the agency and the income tax. I've done everything I can to disprove, this evidence. But, there's a lot of things that give me concern. And by the way, I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution. The Treasury Secretary and the IRS Commissioner tell us that we must report waste, fraud, and abuse. Certainly the ethics of the CPA profession. Everything told me that I needed to speak up. And so I did. And it took I think maybe nearly a week or so.
February 17th, just 9 days later.
There
This
you
is
go.
the letter they sent you, Joe. This is everybody. Yeah, we're going to put this on the recorded thing. Go ahead, Joe. Tell them about your humble response. Several pages, humble response, detailed, clear. You guys, you can read it at agentfortruth.com. All these documents are there. And we put them also link in this description. But yeah, after all that 3.5 pages of introduction, that's all they gave you, Joe. What did it say?
Yeah. Well, in my February 8th letter, I said, of course, I wanted them to respond and to help me through what was going on here. I was finding things that were very concerning, and so I thought, well, maybe I've made an error somewhere, and they can set me straight. Mm-hmm. But I did say, if you can't help me, I will have to resign because I can't serve two masters. Mm-hmm. I can't, serve God and have integrity, and yet also not have these questions and concerns addressed. Mm-hmm. And so in the letter that you just showed, on the 17th, the response was very short, and it was, we'll be happy to provide you with the paperwork to tender your resignation. Mm-hmm. Without any answers. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so once they gave me that letter, and this is up in the, what's today called the Special Agent in Charge of the San Jose Central California District, they took I was to go downstairs and turn in my firearm and my badge and my credentials, and basically all I was left with was a pager. And I was sent home for a week of administrative leave. Mm-hmm. And they basically said, call us in a week, keep your pager close by in case we call you. And they sent me home for a week to think about what my next move would be. So they didn't fire me, but they, put a time frame of a week of administrative leave. And so as you saw by the letter, that began on February 17th. Mm-hmm. So then February 25th, so anyway, I did go home on February 17th and, dealing with a very perplexed spouse, my wife, who, I had taken a pay cut back when I started with the IRS, put her through hell by having to go to Glencoe, Georgia for, 16 weeks of training. The travel that was involved in being a criminal investigator. And then she was aware that during this 2-year period through 1997 and 1998 that I was investigating these things. And she was concerned about that. But when I actually came, home on February 17th and said, I doubt I'm going to have this job much longer, it was very painful for her, for the family, for myself. And so during that week, I basically thought, long and hard about what should I do. There aren't any self-help books, about how to quit a position as an IRS special agent. But I decided, and I was getting, opinions from all kinds of people, including yourself. And I just thought, I really have earned a good reputation for honesty and hard work. And what I don't want is to stick around the IRS and let them dirty me up with some fake, accusations. And of course, in hindsight, I think I made the right decision. I mean, I'm sure your audience is well aware of the way, the media and the government have to dirty people up, who don't deserve to be dirtied up. Mm-hmm. So I did decide that I was going to resign. And so February 25th of 1999, during that week, I basically composed a resignation letter. Mm-hmm. And I, looking at the calendar, I'm like, wow, okay, so the 25th of February is my birthday. And it's also the day in 1913 when Philander Knox claimed that the 16th Amendment had been ratified. So I thought, wow, the timing of this is pretty crazy. I think I'm going to resign on my birthday, which is really, in a sense, the birthday for the income tax, and the day that I'm going to always remember that I resigned from the IRS. So my resignation letter is dated February 25th, 1999. And what's that going to be? Is that going to be 27 years coming up here? And
in just
February,
a few days,
so.
Joe, it will be 27 years that you resigned from the IRS. And your letter, again, several pages long, folks, is a very respectful, thorough letter, thoughtful letter that Joe wrote to IRS Commissioner Charles Rosati about why he resigned. And then Joe was scheduled to speak at our March 13th, 1999 Freedom Rally of Freedom Law School, where I would have about a dozen or so speakers over 2 days, Saturday and Sunday, speak about various issues related to our freedom, our rights, government corruption. And Joe was scheduled to speak there without his picture, because at the time we went to print to put out the brochures. 2 months ahead in January, Joe was still working for the IRS. He still had not turned the book to his superiors to confront them about, hey, you need to address these legitimate concerns. So his picture wasn't on the brochure at all. And so the first time when we put Joe on our Freedom Rally in March 1999, that was the first time anybody else except myself and maybe a few other people had seen Joe in the movement in person. He came out. We had over 300 people, Joe, that turned out at the event. And at the very end, when you were the last speaker of the whole weekend, it was packed, full. No one was walking around. No one was outside the doors, chit-chatting in the hallway. They all want to know, who is this IRS, special agent who defected from the IRS, from the dark side of Darth Vader to the truth and freedom. Okay, and so it was really a special event. And I remember, like you said, we had 10,000 copies of your book printed, and I think we distributed about 1,000 in one night. Some people got boxes of your books to put out, to get out there to people, because this was such a big deal. And notably, everybody, I had notified all the media in Southern California, Los Angeles greater area. I faxed them about Joe coming out, whistleblower, exposing IRS fraud. And you know how many media reporters showed up, folks? You guessed it, 0 showed up to hear about it. So this is, back then, again, Minchin was very, very new still at that time. So Joe, you left the IRS, and I think we have to kind of end this right now, this part 1 of our interview. In part 2, as I told you guys, we're into how Joe, now that he left the IRS, he went out to try to educate and expose the fraud of the IRS, the massive multi-trillion-dollar fraud of the American people. And with that, went through that process. And then part 3, we will cover how the IRS tried to silence Joel, try to put him in prison for taxes, and that failed. It boomeranged in the face of the IRS. So Joe has a really incredible story, folks. It's absolutely unique. You don't want to miss part 2 and part 3 of that. So Joe, I'd like to thank you very much, my friend, being with us again. And I think we're going to let Joe, I'm going to have to let Joe for the question answer session, right? So Joe, we have to let you go, my friend. We have to take some questions from people. But thank you for being with us. I appreciate you, brother. We'll be in touch with you for the next interview in a few weeks.
Thank you, Peymon. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure, my friend.
Take care.
Take care. Good night, Joe.